welcome to this conversation on imagination and abolition, the second in our series of conversations on the congregational study action issue, abolition, transformation, and faith formation. We are excited to be partnering the Church of the Larger Fellowship and the Commission on Social Witness to bring these conversations to you, to help you think about this issue, and to help us together move this issue forward toward what we hope will be a robust statement of conscience. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Reverend Dr. Michael Tino. My pronouns are they and them, and I am the co-lead minister of the Church of the Larger Fellowship. I'm going to light our chalice with these words from abolitionist thought leader Mariam Kaba, who writes, "Prison industrial complex abolition is a vision of a restructured society in a world where we have everything we need: food, shelter, education, health, art, beauty, clean water, and more things that are foundational to personal and community safety." We're going to run this conversation a little bit differently than we did last month. I'm going to give a little bit of a presentation and then ask some questions of you and put you into some breakout rooms. You'll be randomly assigned to a breakout room to discuss the questions that I'm bringing up. And then we will come back and have a chance to share the things that you discussed in your breakout rooms. We will be recording the session, but we're not recording the breakout rooms. So we hope that that actually allows you to feel a little more comfortable having conversations in your breakout rooms that you know are not going to be recorded, and just bringing the best of those conversations back into the main room. We are recording these conversations because we want to make them available to people who are coming in later than you all to this conversation, to the congregations and individuals who are catching up on the conversations on abolition, because ultimately this process of congregational study and action leads to a statement that the Commission on Social Witness will draft for General Assembly 2027. Is that right? Could that possibly be? Yes, General Assembly 2027. And that, yes, and the last one was recorded, and we are putting these recordings in our resource page at clfuu.org/abolition, which, if I spelled abolition right, which I think I did, is an easy webpage to find, clfuu.org/abolition. We are collecting resources for the study of this topic at that website, and these recordings will all be there. Next month, Aisha Hauser, my co-minister at the Church of the Larger Fellowship, will start us off on a multiple month look at restorative justice practices. We think that that's a ripe area for congregations to look at, bringing abolitionist values to life in our communities. But today I want to ask us to activate our imaginations. And Sam asked for a good definition of abolition, and I think that that's a great place to start. Ultimately, we are seeking the abolition of the prison industrial complex as we know it, which also includes the abolition of slavery. But rather than just jump right to the end of that, rather than just jump to there not being prisons anymore, I think what's helpful to us to do is to start by imagining the society in which prisons are not necessary, because that's what we really want to do, and that is a larger project, a larger societal transformation that abolition is asking us to try on. Because rather than just being about one thing, the abolitionist mindset is looking at fundamentally um, our society's philosophy of sin and punishment, which is a theology, really. So I think it behooves us to look at Unitarian Universalist theologies of sin and punishment. It asks us to envision the world in which violence and punishment are not uh, the automatic um, the automatic responses to anything that transgresses the rules of society. Um, so I want us to activate our imaginations. I firmly believe, and I take I take my I didn't actually light my chalice, and I said I was going to light my chalice. Pardon me. Um, I firmly believe in what Mariam Kaba uh, tells us when she writes that abolition is a vision of a restructured society. It's a vision of a restructured society where everyone has everything that they need, which is what makes abolition such an intersectional justice issue. We're not just talking about prisons, we're talking about food and shelter and medical care. We're also talking about health and art and beauty. Um, Everyone should have what they need to flourish. And that gets to our Unitarian Universalist values. Because in our values, we now proclaim that because everyone has inherent worthiness, everyone has the right to flourish with dignity and love and compassion. We, delegates to the Unitarian Universalist General Assemblies, chose that word, flourish, to put into our values, that everyone has the right to flourish. And so I want us to imagine a society in which everyone is flourishing. This society in which we do not need prisons anymore. I want us to imagine a society in which no person is disposable, in which no person is given up on, in which every person has everything they need, not only to survive, but to thrive, to flourish, in fact. I want us to imagine a world transformed by people such as ourselves who insist on centering love in our every action. And so there are some things that we have to do in order to make abolition work. I believe first we need to understand and eliminate the root causes of crime. We have to examine and change our public philosophies of harm, crime, and justice. And we need to change our society's embedded public theology of sin and punishment, as I mentioned before. And it really is, it's a theology. And the public theology currently at work in the United States society is quite fundamentally flawed. And it is at the center of so much that we rightly criticize in our society. And we rightly criticize it as the inheritors of Unitarian and Unitarian Universalist traditions that have criticized that theology for hundreds of years. So first, I want us to imagine eliminating the root causes of crime from our society. Study after study after study has shown that the main driver of crime in our society is economics, that people lacking what they need to flourish is the leading cause of crime in our society. So, what would our society have to look like in order for people not to have to make a choice of whether they were going to pay their rent or buy food for their children? For example, for one small example among many, many examples. What would our society have to look like in order for everyone to have the resources they need, not to be tempted to get it in other ways? I want us to think about that together. I want us to think about addiction and mental health issues. We all probably understand that addiction and mental health issues are also a major driver of what we call crime in the United States, what would it look like if our society were structured in such a way that everybody had access to abundant mental health care and addiction care, and that we didn't stigmatize that in our society? So not only was it abundant and accessible and affordable, if not free, but it also didn't come with a stigma attached to it. How would we have to change what we do in our society? I want us to imagine that together. I believe that we have to make a clear distinction about harm and crime. Uh, we do not need to go very deep to understand that not all that we label a crime is harmful. And some things that are harmful, many things that are harmful to others, are not considered criminal. So I'll give you one example of the latter, which is wage theft. Wage theft is rampant. Companies shortchange their workers, tips get stolen. Uh, just today, it was announced that Starbucks had reached a settlement with the city of New York to pay Starbucks workers in the city of New York um, quite a lot of money for the wage theft that they had engaged in by changing their hours and reducing people's hours to eliminate benefits and reducing their hours without notice, which is a violation of New York City law. I'm in New York, so that made the news where I live. Nobody at Starbucks is going to jail for that wage theft. Nobody in Starbucks is being imprisoned for that wage theft. The people at Starbucks are paying money because wage theft in the United States is considered a civil action. People can pay money to get out of that harm if they're caught and if they're prosecuted. Similarly, many things that are labeled criminal are not harmful to anyone at all. And we can see this in state after state after state that is legalizing the recreational use of marijuana, for example, which, we can have conversations about whether it's good for the individual's body or not. But the possession of a recreational amount of marijuana is not harmful to other people, and yet we lock people up for it. And we disproportionately lock up Black and brown and poor people in our country for that thing that we label a crime. So imagine, if you will, that we've made a clear distinction about what is harmful and what is not when we talk about criminality. And that we've come up with a way, when people do harm, to engage in nonviolent actions rather than being locked up by an increasingly militarized police force in a prison system that strips them of humanity. Again, next month we're going to be talking about restorative justice practices that ask people, rather than just to be punished, to engage in the work of relationship building, the work of reparation. I want us to imagine the society in which our first instinct when someone does harm is to engage them in reparation and repair, in restoration and repair, rather than punishing them, locking them up, labeling them for life. And in case you were worried I wasn't going to go there, there are some people who are just sociopaths in our society and who need, for the good of everyone, to be separated from our society. There are not as many as Law and Order and the media drawn to sell ads would have us believe, but certainly there are some. So I want us to imagine that we have come up with a way to humanely and effectively and humanly separate people from society without caging them. And finally, I think we need to imagine there's a different theology at work, because the public theology at work in our country is hundreds, if not thousands of years old. And it says that when someone does something outside of the bounds of society's rules, they become less than. They become disposable. The United States Constitution even legalizes the enslavement of people who are being punished for a crime. It's the out in our 13th Amendment. And so we, as punishment for a crime, jump to, in response to crimes, in response to harm, we jump right to punishment. And this really goes right back to the theology that says that people are inherently depraved at their core. Unitarianism rejected the Puritans' notion of the inherent depravity of humanity several hundred years ago. But because that's the theology at work in our society, we attach irreversible labels to people. They're not just descriptors, they're indications that someone's worth has been diminished in the eyes of society. We label them disposable. So once someone gets out of prison for the rest of their life, they have to submit to background checks and explain what they do. They have to sign at the bottom of every job application that they fill out all of the things that they have been convicted of doing. And they get to be punished again and again and again. So we have to imagine how that might change. The good people of the state of California tried to imagine it just last year. They tried and they failed in their imagination. A ballot initiative was on the ballot. I don't know how many of you are here from California, and I'm sorry to put you all on the spot, but a ballot initiative made it to the ballot last year in California to ban enslavement in California, which really would have meant to ban slavery in prisons in California. And it failed. It failed because the state of California is addicted to the money that they make off of selling the enslaved labor of prisoners to for-profit companies. And so the state of California lobbied to get people to vote against that amendment. The people who are incarcerated in California deserve better than that. They deserve a chance to be brought back into relationship rather than disposed of. They deserve to be brought into practices and systems that ask them to transform themselves and their communities after what they have done or what they have been accused of doing. And it really does boil down to theology. So I want us to imagine this together because I believe that we don't get to abolition before we can imagine this. We don't get to abolition before we start building the things that we imagine. And I know that we're going to imagine some pretty long-term things together because I know who you all are. You're Unitarian Universalists who are engaged in the Commission on Social Witnesses Congregational Study Action issue, which means you care about social justice in this country, in this world. And we're going to be imagining some pretty big things, right? We're going to be imagining some pretty big things, and they're going to seem maybe a little too big. But I want us to remind ourselves that someone imagined what we have now. Someone imagined the human rights violations that the United States administration is currently engaged in. They wrote a book about it, right? They wrote a book about their imagination and they published it. And people tried to get other folks to read it. And frankly, not enough people did, or not enough people believed that imagination was possible. But people imagined the prison system that we have now. People imagined solitary confinement as an actual response to crime and to harm. Solitary confinement, which has been shown again and again to be a form of torture. Someone imagined it. People imagined it, and then people convinced one another that it was necessary. We know better. We know that it doesn't work. We know that it's harmful to people, and we can imagine something different, right? We can imagine a system in which people are talking about being pardoned for financial violations. And yeah, a system in which you can't buy access to a pardon for the wrong that you've done. You actually have to make repair in our society, but also you're not thrown away because of the harm you've done either. You get the chance to make repair. So I want us to imagine what that looks like, and I want us to talk about it in breakout rooms. So I'm going to put you in breakout rooms now. We have 35 people here. So we're going to make 5 breakout rooms, and you are going to be assigned to a random breakout room with I'm sorry, with 5 people ish. There are going to be 7 breakout rooms, and I'm going to ask you to talk about this for about the next 15 minutes, and then I will bring you back. I will bring you back into this room, and we can share the highlights of that discussion. Keep track of what the highlights of your discussions are, and I will see you in 15 minutes. Say yes to this invitation, if you would. Well, welcome back, beloveds. I hope those were interesting conversations. Um, and I would love to hear some of the highlights of what you imagined. And probably with 35 people in attendance, we should use the Zoom raise hand function, which on my screen is down at the bottom next to React. So if you want to raise your hand, I can call on you. I would love to hear the highlights from your breakout rooms. Nicole.
The group I was with was a great group. Um, it we started off talking about having to look at children because of
Mm,
so many of the people who end up in jail have childhood trauma that or don't or are from the foster care system, so that their upbringing is disjointed and interrupted and not nurturing. Um, and about how education can play a role, because if you want to try to improve the situation for the children, you have to improve the situation for the parents,
mm,
because the parents are often children of trauma themselves. So you have to find a way to apply what you're doing to break that cycle, because you could go back to the grandparents and fortunately we don't all live forever, so you can start somewhere. Um, um, we started also talking about the level of what you were talking about, how people who are actual sociopaths need to be separated, but how do we do that um, without locking them in a cage, without throwing them away? We didn't really have um, answers. The technologies, we do have technologies about brain development or brain activity, but it's how to apply what we are learning and knowing about the technologies without um, weaponizing technology, if that makes sense. That it's a
mm-hmm,
tool, but not an answer. And then we finished discussing looking at restorative justice as a strategy compared to uh, the standard criminal justice path, or even with talk therapy, it doesn't necessarily um, um, address the need to actually be accountable and to interact with the people that you have impacted to have that kind of repair work. You had mentioned before, Michael, the repair work that
mm-hmm.
repairs the community, really keeps people connected. So that's kind of what we went through in a nutshell. Sorry, that
Yeah,
was
and
kind of long.
if you haven't read it yet, I'm going to recommend
Hmm.
Rabbi Danya Rutenberg's On Repentance and Repair, which was the common read for UU congregations a couple of years ago, and was originally published by our own Beacon Press, and that she has just released an updated version of. But it's a great handbook for what repentance and repair really means. Becca.
Okay, well, I had put my hand up to report from group one, and
Mm.
Karen also has her hand up, so we'll see if we manage not to repeat each other. So, we talked about starting with children and school and having training for teachers and parents on repentance and repair. So if we started with children, they would pass it on. And if we started,
Mm,
and we would need to start with teachers and parents so that they were able to teach those skills in the home and at school both. Then we talked about how you reach goals is by breaking them down into smaller pieces. So you don't say, okay, we want to abolish the prison. Kai talked about Sweden, where they wanted to eliminate road deaths, and they started with small pieces, so that we do that with this goal as well. We think about what
hmm
small pieces can we start with. Change drug use from criminal to a medical approach. Stop seeing prison as punishment because people are so bad. So thinking about alternatives to those kind of stuff. We talked about changing laws about corporate behavior, which currently um, is set up legally to create concentrated wealth at the top and poverty at the bottom, to change laws so that corporations have responsibility to their communities and to their employees, and that we could put limits on the legal differentiation between the highest paid and the lowest paid in a company. And then we talked about what if we could make it illegal for healthcare, prisons, and schools to be for profit, so
mm,
that take that profit motive out of prison and see what happens. That things might change a lot. And also just the concept that changing the public theology, as you said, where is our collective horror at our prisons, at this idea that because someone did harm, we have to do just as bad harm or worse to them? Where is our horror at that kind of revenge, punishment motivation? So that's what I got from our discussion.
wow. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Karen, you had your hand up and then put
I
it
just
down
want
and then
to
put it back
say,
up again. So I'm going to call
Becca,
on you next.
Becca, perfect. You did, you got it all. You did a great job. But I liked at the very end what you mentioned about harm, and but I liked make it horrifying. Make it horrifying to do harm when harm is done. And I that really hit me. But thank you,
Mm,
Becca, because you encapsulate. Thanks.
thank you. Mark.
I was part of group four. Um, we talked about removing crimes that are not harming people, and shifting ultimate concerns away from finances so that incarcerating people was not a reason for people to make decisions as to that is why we should incarcerate more people.
Mm,
We talked about being a radically individualistic society where we opt in, and that having that shape the decisions that we make leads to radical loneliness, and that can put people in situations where they make choices that lead them into these situations. We also talked about reparations and repair work that's being done in the Delaware Center for Justice. And we also talked about imagining that there are societies where people don't do a lot of crime or harm because it is part of maybe the ethics or the moral the morals of that community, but that often sorry, I lost my place in my notes. Um, and then we also talked about reimagining the education system in this country, of one that people would learn how to be in relationship with other people and how to restore their relationships with society and also with individuals when harm was caused.
Thank
If
you.
anyone else had anything that I missed a lot, I know, but
It's
feel
all
free to
good.
raise your hand.
They can raise their hand and edit. And we will I believe 2 months be having someone talk about using restorative practices in schools. And when we talk about like manageable chunks to take on, I believe very fervently that that's a super manageable thing for our congregations to work with local school districts to introduce restorative practices in schools. And there's no better time to introduce it than when kids are young. Tara.
Hi. Well, we're in group 7, and first of all, we really liked the definition of abolition as, a vision of a restructured system where everyone has enough. We also we talked a lot about, education and mental health care and and social issues, and how a lot of people are not equipped. We don't know how to talk about mental health and other issues, and if our education were more robust, maybe we would be able to do that. And another example that was given is how the UUA has a really good sex education program that is not necessarily in the public schools. So if like that was just one of the things was, and also someone brought up like a case of in a country like, I don't know, this is Finland or somewhere, and they had prisons, but they're like open air campuses, and everybody is the people who are there are equal to the people who are working there. They all eat together, and it's just, really different than our society, and they don't have all the gun violence that we do here, and everybody has the resources to that they need to better themselves. And also, I think we were also worried about you know people being what would happen to the people who are being made unemployable by like machines and AI because of, you know, the economy and which is, a driver of crime. And hopefully if I missed anything, other people can um, chime in.
Thank you. Yeah, as especially in times of great economic shift, making sure that people are not disposed of by the economy is really important. Other folks from other groups? Some good conversations in the chat about uh, changing cultures in school. If anyone wants to unmute and say that, that would be great. But yeah, and giving people emotional investments and support in their communities. Go figure that. Kai? Is it Kai?
You got it right. People
Okay.
have been getting my name right. It's a wonderful change. Anyway, so yeah, I just wrote in the chat some other stuff that I had brought up and some things that I didn't bother to bring up in the breakout room, where social supports have been stripped away for the past several decades, and that's led to a lot of American culture shifting into a more apathetic state with regard to our fellow Americans, our fellow human beings. We have to call new Americans migrants or immigrants or refugees instead of just neighbors and new Americans or whatever. And we have to call, if someone's arrested, we automatically assume they're guilty, which is completely un-American. But one thing I mentioned was there's a practice called zero tolerance that you hear a lot about. And a lot of times you'll have a kid who is needled by a bully, and that bully knows what they can get away with, and they keep doing what they can to make that kid feel threatened and vulnerable because the teachers do nothing. The kid can go to the principal, go to their parents. Oh, well, they're not doing anything really wrong, and it's, they aren't going to just say, hey, leave that kid alone. Don't bug them. If I see you bugging them, or if they come to me and say you've been bugging them, then, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a talk, because at that point it's harassment, it's bullying, regardless of if it's not strictly breaking the rules. But then when that victim lashes out at the bully or at someone else because they don't feel safe and they don't feel like their protection is kept in mind or kept as a value, then what else are they going to do? And then now, oh, there's zero tolerance, so you're kicked out of school because you were, fighting or whatever. And then also it's been mentioned when they've done, when they've had addicts come out of rehab and felons come out of prison, when those people go back to wherever and they're given an investment in that community, not just, oh, how am I going to find a job? How am I going to support myself? I'm an ex-con, I can't get a job. No, you have a job, you have a place to live, you have a community, you have a church that accepts you, and so on. When you have that investment, those individuals, those people who have been through these systems don't have as much of a drive to go and get high, and don't have as much of a drive to go and steal something or whatever in order to support themselves, because they don't have the need. They have all this other good stuff, and that plays into what I was talking about with the zero tolerance. You focus on the incentives for good behavior instead of the punishments for bad behavior, because that always has a much stronger motivating factor psychologically in human beings. If I say, if you clean up the kitchen and get everything done, I'll give you a cookie, you're going to get that kitchen cleaned up real quick. But if I say, if you don't get that kitchen cleaned up in the next half hour, whatever, you don't get to have a cookie, you're going to be like, oh man, you're going to be like, this is unfair, What if I get it, clean, but it's not quite clean to their standard, No, instead, oh, you clearly made an effort, here's your reward. That is way more incentivizing from the time we're little to whatever age we reach. I guarantee you.
Thank you. And Betsy writes in the chat that what you described mirrors outcomes in domestic abuse cases in our courts. And I'm sure that Betsy meant your description of zero tolerance and bullying in schools.
Yeah, you always see that a lot where they always try and make it like it's an exchange.
Mhm.
Oh, it's a mutually abusive system. And it's no one's fault really, except there is usually a primary abuser and the other person is usually defending themselves.
Yeah. So how do we stop those cycles? Thank you for the ideas. Thank you for the imagination.
One of the reasons why I mentioned the Sweden idea of zero car deaths, zero traffic deaths, was because they figured out that they could whittle away at it until they reached that goal, rather than saying, oh, let's do a big general sweeping program or one big bill. Sorry, that's an ugly phrase these days, but one big bill that'll just solve everything. And instead, lots of little measures that we can actually pass. And if that measure doesn't work out, we can retract it and we can try another route. Because those little measures are basically breaking down a big challenge into small, manageable goals. And that's the way they tell you how to accomplish anything. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. John Woo.
Just one of the things that was mentioned in our group was the need for a universal basic income. because some of those economic factors that you mentioned as being, part of the criminal justice problem, it's real. Universal basic income would be helpful.
Amen. Amen. And actually, like, paying people living wages would also be helpful.
Oh, well, yeah, that too. And actually paying them
Right.
rather than wage theft.
Actually paying them.
In our group too, talked about starting locally and having programs with goals that can show success, especially if the success saves money.
Mhm.
That has been successful at the local level.
Thank you. Mary.
I'm so sorry, didn't get here earlier, but one of the things Betsy mentioned in the chat that we do this till they free us, but which is some of Angela Davis's work. But I just recently discovered reading Angela Davis on my own, and I just reading Demolition, Democracy, Demolition, Abolition, and also I think it's Our Prisons Obsolete. And I think everything, she has writings and they're online and you can just download them and read them if anybody's interested, because she gives you a history of how we got here.
Yeah, and we've if there are resources that are not listed at the abolition resource page, clfuu.org/abolition, send them to us and we'll add them. We are collecting those resources. But Mariam Kaba's "We Do This Till We Free Us: Abolitionist Organizing and Transforming Justice" is one of the very best starting places to think about this. This is where the quote that I started us with today comes from this book, and there are 2 study guides that are linked for it at the Abolition website. So you can do a book group at your congregation and read this together. Cindy.
Hi, yes. I one of the things I've been thinking about, though, we can design the society that doesn't have prisons, perhaps, but I think you first have to design a more compassionate society. And we are, everyone I talk to, I live in Florida, everyone I talk to talks about how horrible we can make punishment. And now empathy is now suddenly a very bad trade. And, individualism is more important than group. So I think that part of our efforts have to be on how do we generate compassion in our society, for other people who are not necessarily in your family, your clan, your race, whatever it might be, and I think that that's what troubles me the most, is that how do you start with building the compassion and the sense that the collective is better than the individual?
Thank you. Well, I very much appreciate all of this imagination coming out of the groups. If there's anything that anyone else wants to add, please do.
I was, if I can just talk one more time for a second.
Please.
One of the things I did mention in the little group was the Michael Moore film, What Do We Invade Next? I think it was called, or something like that. And he went into both a high security and a low security prison in, I just looked it up, it's in Norway. I couldn't remember which country it was, but the guards were mentors. The whole thing was, it is a prison, but it's open air. And somebody had mentioned before, like a college campus. no guns, it's structured around, assimilating what life on the outside is and hopefully moving people very quickly to the outside. I see something like that as an incremental step, that if we can build better places, invest money in that rather than in cages, maybe there's that's an incremental step. And they don't have the recidivism that we have in this country. That was the really remarkable thing about the film, is people weren't going back there. They were in a pleasant environment, but they weren't going back. And, and even murderers don't serve more than 21 years. That was one of their other things. So, yeah, I think that, we have to look at what other societies are actually doing and how, we can build to scale certain systems like that. And yeah, of course, you'll have to start small.
Thank you. Thank you. So as we start to wrap up, and I'd like us to think about that. Oh, Betsy, you have your hand up, please.
Just briefly in response
No,
to what
go ahead.
someone just said. I know I'm in Pennsylvania, and I know that at one of our prisons there's a little experimental vision of using the Scandinavian models within the prison. So there is some awareness in the US of looking at Scandinavian systems, and they have this one unit in Chester Prison, which there are some there are some little YouTube kind of videos about it. It's called Little Scandinavia, and you can look it up that way if you're interested in that.
I lived in North Carolina for 15 years, and as they would say, there will bless their hearts that they have to have one little unit in Chester County to try it.
Well,
I'm glad that they're trying it. I'm very glad. I'm glad that they're trying it, and it's just it like we know it works. We know it works.
well, I think the interesting thing about it is the people who are finding out how well it works are the guards.
Mm,
And I think that that's a significant win.
yes, amen to that. So as we do wrap up, I want to just ask if there are things that would make it easier for you to bring this to your congregation. If you could let us know. You can email me at leads@clfuu.org, and I'm going to put this in the chat. And again, our website is clfuu.org/abolition. And next month, Aisha Hauser will be introducing us to restorative justice practices. We're going to spend, I hope that you will come back. We're going to spend a couple months exploring restorative justice practices. We have someone coming in specifically to talk about how to use them, how to use restorative practices in schools. But we're going to dig a little deeper, and then we'll talk about theology for a couple months. So get your theology nerd hats on, and we'll talk about theology for a couple months. But I want us to actually have that the experience of getting a little deeper. This is the second in our series of introductions to abolition. So thank you so much for imagining with me. Any final comments before I extinguish our chalice? May you go forth from this place challenged to see the poisonous fruits of toxic theology in our midst. May you go forth inspired to co-create something new. May you go forth sure of your power and your responsibility to participate in the dreaming of what can be. May you ground that dreaming in a vision of a world made more loving and more just by a theology that includes everyone. Blessed be, and amen. Thank you so much for your time tonight, or this afternoon if you're on the West Coast.
Thank you.